Alright, welcome back to another Sn95 coyote swap video. So on the last video we kind of wrapped up the fuel system on the car. So we got, the entire fuel system mounted, plumbed, and essentially routed how the tuner wants it to be routed, right? So spoke to him, got, confirmation to run the lines a specific way. We'll set base fuel pressure once we get battery power to the car, once everything's all wired up. So speaking of battery power, so today we are going to be working on wiring. So the next step for the fuel system is now wiring. So I kind of wanted to, this might be a little bit of a long video, but I want to cover all the wiring for the coyote swap in this video. So we'll start with the fuel system wiring. This is all the wiring that you essentially need to wire in the fuel system for a Sn95 fuel system. So you do have your dual pump controller. So essentially, treat this just like almost like a stereo amplifier is the easiest way to understand it. You have a main battery and a main ground, and then you essentially just have a trigger for fuel pumps, pumps 2 and 3. And then a remote for pump 1, and then you'll wire in your pumps here. So this is the FC3 staged pump controller. So if you just want to run one pump and then on a switch operate 2 more, or vice versa, this is how you do it, right? We will not be adding in any kind of switches because that's going to be more for like a boosted application, something high horsepower, crazy like that. So we will be running the 2-3 setup, direct power to the pumps, and then that way we don't have to really worry about kind of adding any kind of switches or nothing like that. So I was talking about just kind of, treat this like an amplifier. So battery power, chassis ground, and then you have your outputs for the pumps. And how you kick them on is you use 6.5 volts. So you can use your old existing trigger for the pump, the old wire that would essentially turn on your single pump. You can route it in here, and now that kicks on the relay inside of here. This is essentially like an enclosed fuse box. So it'll trigger the relay in here to send straight battery power to your 2 pumps. So let's start with finding where we want to mount this. So I'm thinking as close to the pumps as possible is where I want to mount it. I was thinking about putting it in here in the spare tire well, probably in there. We do have a nice little grommet right here, and then we can run our battery cables on the opposite side of our fuel lines. I don't really like running battery cables next to fuel lines in case there's ever a short. It's away from the nice soft fuel lines. That way they're never in contact, and you don't have to worry about having a short while driving and having, blasting it with fuel. So we'll run it through the driver's side, through that nice little grommet. We'll add a riv nut or some kind of threads, weld them on, or, riv nut style, and put our ground as close to here, because the shorter the ground, we don't need as thick of a cable. Hopefully the battery cable is thick enough for the distance. And then even then, Sn95 even provides this really nice inline fuse, which is also like just the detail that they put into this little fuse box is amazing. It even has a spare fuse. This, it already has one installed, and then you have a spare one right where the box closes. So if you ever blow this fuse, your spare is literally right there. And then if you don't know if you use your spare or not, you can literally just look at the fuse box. Oh, is the spare still there? Boom. If it's not, then order a new one. Easy day. And then you got your pump wiring right here, battery cable with ground on the back. And then of course, they make it so you can just mount it straight through the sheet metal, or put threads, whatever you like. If I have a riv nut or a nut that I can weld in that is this threads, I think I'm gonna go that route, and then just put a locking washer on it as well. So, all right, let's get started. Let's go ahead, mount that fuel pump controller, and then start routing some cables. All right, so I did mount the FC3 controller here, and I even welded in a nut for a ground so I can have the best ground possible. I did try doing a riv nut, but I mean, I just didn't like it, so I went ahead and just welded it. And of course, with my luck, my welder did run out of welding wire, but luckily I had a spare spool. But one thing I did want to note before I kind of wrap up this wiring and then show you exactly how I wired everything, I wanted to kind of give you guys just a quick little heads up. So a cool thing about 4 and their FC3 controller is it has these little sleeves inside, you know, like the fuse, little box, and inside the FC3 controller. So you just back out your little set screw, which looks like this. It's just like a little Allen head set screw, and kind of reach in there and you'll get this little sleeve. Now you can either choose to crimp this on now if you have the special little hexagonal pliers, or kind of just jam it in there. So I thought this was just like a really cool little piece, and see, you can kind of see where the set screw just kind of smashes it a little bit just from that little bit of pressure. It's very thin, but this will keep the wire tidy and keep any little loose strands from kind of like poking out and potentially arcing. So I just kind of wanted to highlight this little piece from the 4 Innovations fuel system wiring, and it's pretty awesome. So let me button up this wiring, and then our next step would essentially be to get our remote wire here from the control pack or from the Mustang itself. So we'll look at our instructions and see how we're gonna go about it. Alright, so just to kind of give you guys a recap of the wiring harness, so hopefully I don't get copyrighted for that music that my neighbors are playing, but we started ourselves at the battery. We have our really nice 4 Innovations fuse block right there. Come in through the wheel well, so I still just need to add like one more little mount. We used P-clamps all throughout. Follow right behind the pinch weld where it's nice and hidden. You're not going to see a bright red wire. And we essentially follow the frame. You can kind of see it right there. We essentially followed the frame up and over the exhaust. Kept plenty of space away from the exhaust using those P-clamps, so it's very secure. And honestly, I would have loved to go through that hole right there, but unfortunately our panhard bar, the mount covers that hole. So I had to go to the next best one, which was this one right here, and it's straight through, shot through the frame. Already has a factory grommet, so that was very nice. I didn't have to really make anything other than just punch a hole through the rubber grommet. Our ground is a welded nut to the frame as well, so we can get the best ground possible. You can securely fashion that if I wanted to in the future. I could also run, oh, my light died. See if it'll survive a few more minutes. Nope. All right, so let me turn this light on. There we go. So that ground is securely fashioned. If I want to in the future, I can run a ground straight from the block all the way back here, and I got a really nice firm mount. So moving on to the FC3 controller, I did use some sheet metal screws to essentially punch a hole on each side, and then went after it with a drill bit to enlarge the holes and put 2 riv nuts. So now I have threads in there, and this is easily removable and serviceable. So here you got your main battery, your ground. We will add a remote eventually to essentially turn this on, and that will kick on our pump 2 and 3 setup. So here it tells us what fuses we have for pump 1, 2, and 3. They are 25 amp fuses. And then following the wiring harness to the other side, we ended up using the factory grommet. We did kind of just chop it up a little bit. I did add a little bit of this. Actually, this is original, like Fox body wire loom to kind of match the factory stuff. It's just a little bit more dingy because it's Fox body stuff. And then that's where our wiring goes down, underneath, and into the pumps. Oh, yeah, you can see there's my welding wire box. And all of this with a spare tire. And it fits beautifully underneath where you can't tell anything aftermarket is in here. So that's what I wanted. I wanted to keep it really nice and simple and OEM looking. You can't tell that there's, you know, an FC3 controller and some wires back here. So super clean, tidy setup. Eventually, you know, we'll wash the carpet in here for him and clean this whole car up. So next thing that we got to do is coming over here. We got this nice little box, nice little wiring harness from Lethal Nate, and essentially this will plug into our factory connectors, our factory main wire harness that goes to the ECU, and essentially this will piggyback a lot of sensors, or will add sensors so that our gauges, they work properly. So this also has an integrated T56 harness in there, so we'll be using the T56 Speedo, and it'll integrate with the 2000 GT speedometer and all that stuff. So let me go ahead and start installing this, and then we should be able to pick up our fuel pump, I believe, out of this loom. If not, the factory control pack also has this green wire right here. This is another fuel pump signal that comes from the ECU for the Gen 3. You can either do it this way, or you can use the factory signal out of the Mustang, because we still have the Mustang ECU in here. So when you key on, it will still key on the fuel pump through here. So let me go ahead and figure out these instructions and see which one we're going to use. And if we don't end up using this one, then it's a simple little plug that we just unplug and tuck away, and then we're done. And if you're wondering about the quality of Lethal Nate harnesses, look at that. And a real OEM connector. So brand new, literally says Ford on there, plugs right in. So if I can get it lined up, but plugs right in. And essentially that's all I gotta do now, and then I just gotta figure out which one of these wires goes to what and where, and kind of just tidy everything up. All right, and we're back, you know, a little while later, about a week later, with the correct parts. It's been raining like crazy, so I haven't really been able to record this, but we finally got all the sensors and adapters that we need to finally make all the gauges work. So we got ourselves a Gen 1, 2, and 3 oil pressure sensor adapter. Essentially what this will allow you to run is just by changing the orientation of this, I guess, male-to-male adapter on either side, will either adapt it to Gen 3, where it's in its current configuration, or you just move it to the opposite side, and the thread pitch will be for Gen 1 and 2. So this car uses essentially a Gen 1 or 2 sensor, because it's like 99 to 17 is the exact same sensor for the oil pressure sensor gauge. So this will fix our OEM gauge and make it work like factory. Meanwhile, the ECU will still retain its own sensor, so we don't hit a code, and then we even have provisions for either another sensor. Power by the Hour says that you can use it for, say, like turbo oil feed, stuff like that. We even got a Motorcraft clutch sensor, which came with the control pack, but we're probably just going to go ahead and bypass it, since the car will not start unless you hit the clutch, since the starter is controlled by the OEM Mustang ECU, not the Gen 3. For that horrible exhaust leak that we had, I kind of just stuffed an extra wideband that I had. You know, simple Amazon O2 sensor plug, comes with a cross washer. That should fix that issue. And then if you're wondering about the oil pressure sensor, again, another OEM piece. So we're gonna make sure this car runs exactly like OEM, like factory. Oh, and if you're wondering about the you will need this part, so this is separate. Power by the Hour does sell some other pieces. Say if you have like a sandwich plate, they'll sell you, you know, the 90-degree fittings for that. I did not need that. I just needed this guy, and these are $5 for a 2-pack on Amazon. So don't know I can't remember the exact thread pitch, but I think it's like 1/4 to 5/8, something along those lines. But on Power by the Hour's website, they tell you, so you can easily just look it up when you gotta order these. So not a very expensive. I mean, the adapter is a little pricey, but everything else is fairly cheap. Now for the RPM gauge, we did have to go with Swap Helper. So this will be our RPM adapter. Let me go ahead and pop this guy open because it's still brand new. Sweet. And they even send a little soda koozie that's gonna get super dirty super quick because it's white. But this is kind of one of those unavoidable items. So when you do a coyote swap, you can save a lot of money by not buying unneeded stuff. But when you're doing kind of like OEM plus builds, these are like one of those things that it's just unavoidable for this application, how we want it to go, right? So we don't always have to buy the most expensive thing, but sometimes there are certain things that are on the pricier side that you just have to buy if you want it to run 100%. So this is how we're going to get our tack to work. And it does have a couple sensors that we will have to wire up. So we'll see how easy it is to wire this up. It looks like it has all the instructions right here for everything. So switch 12 volts, output 2, Cummins RPM sensor. Oh, so this works on multiple vehicles, but we did set ours up for, bam, there's our correct instructions. So 96 to 04 Ford Mustang to Gen 3 Ford Coyote instructions. So comes with multiple sets of instructions. So the Coyote version of this is $100 more expensive than the regular one, just because it does have, I believe, up to a 10,000 RPM limiter on it. So if you're running those crazy RPMs, this is a nice piece. So let me start installing all this stuff. It's pretty easy. Just make sure you got the correct orientation. Make sure we put a little bit of sealant on those threads, and everything should be plug and play. All right, another sensor that I kind of forgot to mention was the coolant temp sensor. So this one, we're actually going to remove one of the block plugs for the coolant passages. That's why the engine did not have coolant, because we were waiting on this guy. So this adapter will thread in, and then we'll be able to run a factory coolant temp sensor. So if anyone's curious, there's the part number for it. It's from LMR. Pretty smart idea. That way you can run a true coolant temp sensor versus the Coyote's, which is inferred cylinder head temp sensor. So the Coyote's, I guess, temp sensor doesn't actually go into the coolant. It's actually on the aluminum of the cylinder head. So, fun fact. Alright, and here we are with all our sensors connected. So you can kind of see, so that bottom one, that is our OEM to the car oil pressure sensor. Then we have the engine's oil pressure sensor on the top, and I believe this is like an oil pressure regulator solenoid, by how it looked when I removed it. And then right next to it we have our coolant temp sensor. So this will require a little bit of specialized tools. So this was a 14 millimeter Allen, and then a pretty big socket. I believe it was a 28 millimeter for the adapter to the block, and then of course the sensor is only like a 19. But that's how they will live from now on. Alright, so it is actually the next day. I got a little bit late, so I did not want to start the car late at night, you know, while people were sleeping and stuff. So I did get the tack adapter wired in. I hit it right next to the PCM. I still have a lot of wiring that needs to be kind of tucked up and put away. So this is like if you want to run electric power steering from, say, like an F-150 or a Mustang. This is if you want to, you know, install a supercharger in the future. This will, you know, run your intercooler pump. And then this one wire for the tack adapter is to program it. So in the future, after I'm done with all my testing, I can program these little dip switch settings into it, and then we can zero all those out, and we hopefully won't have any issues of it changing in the future or giving us some weird RPM fluctuations. So how I wired this in was the white and brown wire were not used, so these guys get tucked away. The gray wire will go to pin 78. That's essentially our RPM signal from the ECU, which I tapped into one of the connectors. I tried doing it, making it look as OEM as possible and as hidden as possible. So that was just like a yellow, like a bright highlighter yellow wire with a dark purple line on it on my ECU. It might be different on yours depending on the year this control pack came out. Then this is where Lethal Nate's wiring harness came out awesome, because in the instructions it calls out that the orange and light blue wire be wired to the gray and dark blue wire. He made those. He essentially looked at the aftermarket and he made sure to set his wiring up so that the instructions make sense. That's why he recommends this product. So the red wire that goes to your key on, which I tapped into the same key on source that the ECU uses, so they share that key on source from underneath the dash. In the future, we could probably add one coming straight out of the connector there, just to kind of simplify and make those wires a little bit shorter and a little bit nicer. They still need to be loomed, so don't look at that right now. But right now we have everything running properly. I finally got this coolant system plumbed back in. I was able to fit the tank. I mean, I think in the future I still want to move it further to the right or put a smaller one, just because it kind of does contact this pipe. Or maybe with the cowl hood, you know, we can maybe adjust this higher, giving us a little bit more room so it's not tapping on this and giving us some false knock. The power steering, it does need a little bit of fluid, but I did cut up the bracket completely to where it only gave me these 2 bolts, and then I just welded a small piece of metal to the back of it, and then just with a really small nut on one of these existing studs, and then your harness loom literally clips back into the remaining threads. This car still does have a vacuum leak, so this intake does not require a tune made by by the hour. That's why, you know, I choose certain parts. But we do have a massive vacuum leak here, so I'll probably cap that for this startup. The fuel pump wire runs along with the fuel pump controller main power wire. So we're going to be using the control pack to trigger the fuel pumps. So anytime you key on, the computer will control the fuel pumps by essentially turning on that controller that's in the trunk that I showed you. Everything is loomed nicely, so now we are kind of getting to the point where everything just needs to be covered up, put the wheel wells back in, everything will be hitting, and you shouldn't see a lot of this mess. Let's see, what else am I forgetting? I think that's pretty much it to this whole system. It's pretty basic, pretty easy. The instructions, I will say, were a little bit confusing to me at first, but once I really just followed them to a T and just kind of figured it out, it was actually very, very simple. So if you have a Gen 3 swap using this tack adapter, again, orange and light blue wire, those are your essentially output signals. White and brown, not used, and then your gray, that is your input signal from the ECU, and then your red and black, that's your it goes to the battery ground. So that's what I did. I routed it to the exact same ground that the PCM, the battery, and this is grounded to. So they're all grounded together on the same exact ground. So it gets a direct ground from the battery. And then this green wire, you tap it to just a battery source afterwards, and then that will essentially program this system. So without further ado, let's see if we can get this thing started and see if we can see some RPMs and some signals coming from the PCM and from all these sensors that we added. Alright, so getting in the car with the key in the ignition, everything is working, you know, smoothly. Everything's working kind of how it should. We got the ding for the really annoying, you know, key in the ignition, ding and all that noise. So for our control, we're just going to be using the old SCT device that came with the car to see if we can monitor RPMs. So let's see if I can put this somewhere where I can easily see it. And then we can see up here. So pumps kicked on like normal, did the little 2-3 second to build up pressure, and then we can just crank it so it turns off like stock, starts no issues pretty quickly, and then it looks like we are idling at about 1200 RPM. Look at our gauges, about 1300, 1200 RPM. So we are right then and there. Now we are looking at our battery voltage. We got battery voltage, we got oil pressure, coolant temp is going to take some time to come up. Gas, we have 0 gas, so the gas gauge does work, but we only put like 3 or 4 gallons in this thing, so it is low, so I'm not going to really run it very long. So another one that we're going to do real quick is just mile an hour. There it is, it's in 3rd gear. And this one we won't be able to verify until even our low fuel light works. That is awesome. Boom. We do have a little check engine light and ABS light. This car did have an ABS light before, and probably the check engine light is because we're running the stock ECU. Let me just go ahead and shut this off so you can hear me. We are running the stock ECU as essentially a dummy ECU. We're essentially just feeding it fake signals so that our gauges work. So this is when you actually do the swap properly, everything should work just like stock. So even our AC controls, I still have to charge that up, and put some vacuum lines again. So we do not have our vacuum lines finished, but I at least wanted to show you guys the ending to all the wiring. Everything is actually looking amazing, working exactly like factory, and it's gonna be so nice. Like the starter, everything is, you won't even know there's a Coyote underneath the hood unless you pop the hood. If you get in this car, you start it, it'll feel just like you're starting a regular 2-valve and driving a regular 2-valve that makes, close to 500 horsepower. So yeah, I think I'll just call it there because this video is getting kind of long-winded. It is a little bit of a long one, but hopefully if you have any questions of how to wire the entire control pack, it's right there. The key on source, I did go from underneath the steering column. It is a red with green stripe wire, and that's actually, I think, the only wire I really had to tap in for the ECU. I did not wire up the fans, so those are controlled again by the factory ECU. I still have to test those if they're coming on. If not, it's one wire. Just plug that in straight into the power wire. If not, our fans should kick on like factory with our AC, all that stuff. It should still have the variable speed on them and everything, essentially like stock. So I still gotta wrap up all the little details of the car. Getting old. Gotta finish topping off fluids on the transmission, on the coolant side of things, on the power steering side of things. I just put a little bit in there so it doesn't scream at me. And then we do have some maintenance to do on this car that it did need. The control arm bushings are absolutely destroyed on this thing, so we just elected to order new control arms because those bushings are gone. They're just absolutely destroyed. Luckily, they're still you can still buy them, so we have some brand new ones sitting over there. So I think on the next video I'll show this car running and driving and potentially going into the tuning process, because the only thing that we should need a tune for in this whole setup is an IMRC delete. Everything else should essentially run like factory. If we literally just tune the IMRC portion of this, there's no exotic tuning required for this car whatsoever. So we ran the correct intake, we ran the correct fuel pressure, we plumbed the fuel system like a factory fuel system, just better, and we made sure that everything else, all the accessories worked essentially like factory. So there you go. The car's running beautifully. No crazy hacked wiring or anything. Everything was pretty easy. It's just tedious. So you just got to take your time, really find out where you want to route all your stuff and all your hoses and all your wiring, and it should come out just as good. And this is where, say, if you were to sell this car, he can, ask a little bit more of a premium, because you can either get a hack job where you're running, your gauges off of a SET device, or someone can get in a car and cruise it with AC, heat, all the amenities, like a bone stock factory car. Like, they wouldn't even know it had a Coyote swap unless they popped the hood or knew about this car. So I got a little bit of wiring, tucking to go, finish programming that RPM tack adapter, and putting our wheel wells back in, doing the maintenance to the car. on the suspension side of the house, and I think after that this car is done. So next video we'll show it running and driving, and maybe doing a little bit of tuning with whichever tuner that the owner of this car chooses to go. I think he wants to go with Lund, which is a great aftermarket tuner. So we'll see if there's any issues following that, or they can tune this car exactly like a Gen 3 Mustang with no issues. So catch you guys later. Peace.